Alright everyone, over the last month Bernie fans have been vainly hoping that there's some way to stop Joe Biden from getting over the delegate threshold and therefore preventing a contested convention, but Joe Biden has now officially clinched the nomination for the Democratic Party. Now, a lot of Bernie's fans have promised they'll burn Milwaukee to the ground if Bernie's not nominee, which, he won't be unless Biden, strokes out, or if he has like a real dementia moment, he might get forced by his inner circle to drop, but that's not likely. Dementia tends to move fairly slowly, and I'm sure that he gets access to all the CIA-crafted super meds that can stave off the menace of his own mind just long enough for him to get into the presidency and therefore leave us the first female president appointed rather than elected, of course, which will cause social problems for decades to come, but, they figure it's worth it to get out evil Trump. I don't, but apparently these morons do. But the Bernie revolution has ended. Bernie Sanders has failed. He failed more spectacularly than in 2016, and I saw this coming, and I warned these people now 2 elections in a row. It was so obvious what was going to happen in 2016. Hillary, from the start, had a 99% chance of being the nominee. She's got the money, she's got the neoliberal backers, and to tell the truth, she simply has better political stratagem than Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, I will say it again, hopefully for the last time. Hopefully he doesn't run again for the Senate. I mean, the dude's pushing 80 years old. At some point, you got to calm down and hand the reins. Let AOC become a Vermonter and run for office. People there probably vote for at least the first term before they get tired of her. Here's the problem. Bernie Sanders spent a long time in politics. He never had a national presence. You got to understand that Bernie Sanders was always the maverick, after name, technically Democrat in name at least, jester that was trotted out once in a while and chuckled about by the Democrats. Hillary Clinton is fundamentally right. People in D.C. didn't like being around him. They don't like working with the dude because he is a nut. He is extremely self-righteous. He yells a lot. He's never particularly humorous. He's a grumpy old man, and that endears him to a segment of the population that doesn't mind that and believes in his policies. It's sort of like a Ron Paul thing. Only Ron Paul is more of the happy grandpa. Ron Paul is your grandpa that's happy and cracks funny jokes and gets kind of zany and then shows off his bunker. Bernie Sanders is the one who just won't fucking give up his college days. He's still stuck in the early 70s thinking that's the way politics work. That's not the way politics work. In the wake of the Jimmy Carter collapse era, U.S. politics moved further to the right, became more I would say socially libertarian in some senses, moral majority bullshit aside, and the left reformed itself. They did this as a reaction to Reagan in order to win elections. Bernie Sanders, meanwhile, was in Vermont, first in the Champlain Valley metro area of Burlington as mayor, then in Vermont at large as a representative and senator. Those elections all involved far-left supermajorities. By the time he got to Burlington to be mayor, by the time he left Brooklyn, arrived in Vermont, did some college shit, worked a job for the first time in his life for a brief period, and then ran for mayor because he didn't have anything else to do and was basically a beatnik by then. Burlington had absorbed thousands and thousands of hippies from the West Coast. Burlington is not fundamentally a Vermont city at all. It's a cosmopolitan city. It's sort of like Amsterdam. There's a lot of expat, second home stuff, a lot of college kids, most of which aren't even from the Vermont. Why do you think Castleton became a university successfully? Because now it's the only university in the state that's got a majority of people that are actually from the fucking state. It's also a lot cheaper. It's a lot more convenient. I should have gone to Castleton. Fuck UVM. I remember when they were flying the BLM flag there years ago and how stupid that was. I'm surprised that they're not flying the communist flag at this point, to tell the truth. He won multiple elections there because it's far-left supermajority. All he has to do is make sure to tell people he's a socialist, and he wins by default. And because of Vermonters' tendency to back the incumbent, all the left-wing Vermonters at least, let alone the hippies, will just keep backing him even if there's another socialist candidate. Because, again, better the devil that you know. Then he becomes a Vermont state politician, running again for several terms House of Representatives, takes a vacant Senate seat up. Vermont, by that point, where we're talking a decade on, had begun to become very far left. Initially, Vermont 40 years ago was rock-ribbed Republican. Now it's extremely far left. It's one of the most liberal states in the Union, although I see that beginning to reverse. The same is true in Maine. There's a new bulwark of GOP activity happening in northern New England. I don't think that New Hampshire will be a swing state for much longer. I think that New England is following suit with the Rust Belt. Just as parts of the South and Southwest are becoming more blue, the Northeast and the Rust Belt are becoming more red, more GOP territory. This is a long-term paradigm shift. Watch what happens over the next 4 or 5 election cycles. Another Sticks prediction for you. Bernie Sanders' revolution, though, now is over. Twice now he has tried and failed to take a platform meant for the far left and export it to the nation at large. Why? The average American opposes socialism. And despite the fact that his fans have tried to sanitize his image by saying, no, he's not a socialist, he's a social democrat, it doesn't help when he's praising Fidel Castro. It doesn't help when he praises socialism and calls himself a socialist. Regardless of whether you have a no true socialist fallacy in your head and don't think he conforms to purist doctrinal socialism because he still believes in you being able to own property or whatever, it doesn't matter. He calls himself a socialist, and if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it's got feathers and it's semi-aquatic, it might be a chicken that's deformed, but it's probably a duck. And that's what most people think. Independent voters leaned heavily against him. That's just his fucking problem. Dude, the Bernie Sanders revolution never even gained any traction. You remember how powerful Bernie supposedly was until he collapsed on Super Tuesday? That's funny. He technically didn't win Iowa at all, and he only scraped by Buttigieg in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, this home turf for him, he wins by a few points. At that point, I called it out for what it was and said, there's no Bernie surge here. And come South Carolina, unless, something really weird happens, Biden knocks him out and then goes on to win Super Tuesday, which is exactly what happened. Anyway, his revolution, so-called, is over, which is a good thing for the United States. It shows that the majority of Americans are still fundamentally intelligent, good human beings who understand that people have the right to own property, to work, to produce, and to be left a fucking goddamn alone. And this is something that Bernie doesn't understand, and it's been very funny watching him con people and sell out his own Vermont constituents too. Because two things that Vermonters, by and large, deviate from the mainline left on. You see, there are different kinds of leftists. I've analyzed this. There's California-style, like left coast, West Coast elite liberals / leftists. There are the revolutionary kinds you get in big cities especially. There's the old South sort of Southern Dem quasi-liberals, the welfare for the white people liberals, you could say. And then there's like the New England liberal. The New England leftist, the Vermont leftist. The Vermont leftist is less accepting of gun control and of open borders than the rest of the groups within the left. It's a quasi-union left sort of Rust Belt holdover plus being rural and pro-gun, hunting, maple syrup, and outdoorsy shit. Bernie Sanders recognized that, was very much opposed in many cases to expanding gun control, for the most part, over his career, and very much opposed to throwing open the borders with the idea that, hey, this fucks wages for American working and middle classers. He's completely thrown those away, and he conned the people of my state. And he's not even from the state. Again, he's a New Yorker. He's a big-time Brooklyn soci-elite sort of person. Sort of like Donald Trump is from, I think Brooklyn initially too, actually. Very interesting. That would have been a funny matchup. Two New Yorkers, one pretending to be a Vermonter. Anyway, Bernie Sanders' career being over, it's pleasing to me. Absolutely. I'm glad Biden clinched. I mean, I'm not going to vote for the dude. I think he's doomed. I think he makes so many mistakes. It's like, and they're not even going to have a convention probably because they don't want the Bernie fans to show up and burn it like they promised to. Instead, they're just burning every other city at the moment. That's about all. Peace out.